Hey guys, this is Zerk's What If, and welcome to my new What If. What if Yuji was like Garou from One Punch Man? Since this one had won the poll, it was going to be the first one I was working on. And when I'm done with What if Yuji was like Yorichi, I will start on the All for One What If. But yeah, let's not get into too many details, let's get right into it. Beginning this story, we would start off years before Yuji would ever even step foot into Jujutsu High. With Yuji being born, in order for his son to become the perfect vessel, Kenjaku, after having Yuji, would end up killing his entire family, leaving Yuji to be taken in by an orphanage. Since Yuji would grow up without the guidance of his grandfather, he wouldn't be the kind kid that he usually is. Yuji, by the age of 8, would always be causing trouble, going in and out of orphanages, causing fights, and beating up other kids. Kenjaku would watch over Yuji, but only from afar. He wouldn't intervene with anything that Yuji was doing. But in order for Yuji to grow as Sukuna's vessel, he would want Yuji to learn cursed energy and understand it as early as he could. While Yuji was at one of the schools in his neighborhood, Kenjaku would plant one of Sukuna's fingers at the orphanage that Yuji was residing in. As Yuji would be returning to the orphanage, after being kicked out of a school he was in, one of the administrators of the orphanage would end up telling Yuji that if he got kicked out another school, he would be kicked out of the orphanage, as he was the problem child. Yuji would simply scoff and go back to his room. As he would lay down, Yuji would begin to ponder, thinking to himself and complain about life is too dull. He wanted some excitement in his life, but nothing was happening. Just as Yuji would say that, he would hear a loud crash coming from the other room. He would jump out of his bed, running to the other room to see what the noise was. Looking into the room, he would see one of the administrators from the orphanages on the ground, beaten and bloodied. He would be confused as to what would cause this to happen, but just as he would turn around, he would see a grotesque-looking beast staring back at him. Immediately taking a fighting stance, he would throw a punch towards the curse, but since he would need curse energy to kill the curse, the punch would only cause the curse to be pushed back a little. The curse would then proceed to lunge at Yuji, with Yuji being able to dodge out of the way, with him yelling at the curse, "Bring it." This had been the excitement that he was waiting for his entire life. He knew there was more to life, and it finally had introduced itself. Yuji, exhilarated at the fact that his life was finally about to change, would rush in at the curse. As Yuji was seemingly a prodigy in hand-to-hand combat, he would be brutally beating the curse. Even though Yuji would be pummeling the curse, it wouldn't be damaging the curse at all. Yuji was seemingly faster and stronger. However, he wouldn't be able to do anything to it. But the curse would also understand that it couldn't touch Yuji, simply because he was faster and stronger. As the curse would realize this, it would try to make a run for the finger. Yuji would be confused as why the creature was running away, darting back in front of the curse and kicking it in the face. He'd ponder in his head and then turn around. This is when Yuji would see a weird looking finger. He would pick it up and ask the curse if this is what it wanted. The cursed spirit would only snarl and lunge at Yuji, trying to get the finger. But Yuji would smile. Without Yuji noticing, another curse would end up behind him, sneaking up behind him and cracking him on the side of the face, sending him into a wall. With the finger still in hand, he would get up with blood pouring from his forehead. Standing up, he would wipe the blood off his forehead, smiling, saying this is what he wanted his entire life, and for both curses to come at him. One of the curses would lunge, swinging down at him. Yuji would dodge, immediately countering it, punching the curse with an attack of his own. The other curse would try to tackle Yuji, but he would flip over the curse, grabbing it by its arms, jumping and putting both legs into the curse's back, ripping its arms off, kicking it into the other curse. The curses would get up, lunging at Yuji once again. He would duck under the first, letting it fly over him, crashing into a wall. Seeing the other curse, he would go in for a kick, but the curse would grab his leg, holding him in place, punching him in the face repeatedly. Yuji would just laugh and enjoy himself, taking each hit on the head. As the curse would throw another punch, Yuji would smash his head into the curse's fist, breaking the curse's arm. With brute strength alone, he would tear out of the grasp of the curse. As he would be about to attack the curse, the other curse from behind would strike Yuji in the back, sending him flying forward. Yuji would be on the ground, bloodied and beaten. However, he was enjoying this. Something exciting had finally happened in his life. He would begin to laugh maniacally, telling the curses that he won't be dying here. His new life had just gotten started. In this moment, with all the emotions stirring within Yuji, something would have unlocked in his brain. Without knowing, Yuji would begin to pump out cursed energy. It was violent and unrefined, and the curses felt it as well. The malice of Yuji's cursed energy was absolutely immense. Without wasting any time, Yuji would run back into the cursed spirits. He would strike one of the curses in the head, blowing its head off in one punch, exorcising it. Just then, Yuji would turn to the other curse, but the curse was already attempting to attack him. It would swing its arm down. Yuji would parry the attack, countering it with a punch of his own, striking the curse in the body, blowing a hole straight through it. As the fight would be over, Yuji would laugh. He would continue laughing until he passed out. As Yuji would wake up, he would find himself in a bed inside of a room with bandages wrapped around his forehead and chest. He would immediately get up, panicking, not knowing where he was or what had happened. He would burst outside of the room, where there would be 3 people talking. As they would see Yuji crash through the door, a man would tell Yuji to calm down. Yuji, not wanting to listen, would attack the man. However, he would be easily blocked. He would continue to throw blows with the man, with the man simply telling him to calm down. Yuji, remembering the feeling that he felt when he fought those curses, would activate it again. Rushing back in, he would throw an overhead punch, with the man dodging out of the way. Yuji would swing around, trying to backhand the man, only for the man to dodge again. Yuji would throw strike after strike with his attacks, either being dodged or blocked easily. As Yuji would keep attacking, this would go on until Yuji would tire himself out. This is when the man would ask Yuji if he was done, and would he actually be willing to listen. Yuji would simply look up and ask a man to train him, with the man telling him that that's exactly what he intended on doing. The man would introduce himself, telling Yuji that his name was Geto. He would tell Yuji that he couldn't imagine how surprised he was when he felt a powerful cursed energy presence, and when he went to check it out, he was surprised to see just an 8-year-old kid knocked out on the floor with an immense amount of cursed energy flowing throughout him. Not only was he surprised that Yuji had an immense amount of cursed energy, he was also surprised that Yuji was holding on to a special grade cursed object. Yuji would ask Geto what he was talking about. He would explain to Yuji what Sukuna's fingers were, and tell him that that must have been the reason that the cursed spirits were wandering around the orphanage that day. Yuji would then ask Geto what's so special about a special grade cursed object. Geto would then explain to Yuji that weaker cursed spirits would go after special grade cursed objects and eat them in order to get stronger. Yuji would then ask Geto what would happen if he were to eat it. Would it make him stronger? Geto would tell Yuji that if he were to eat it, it'd probably be more like a deadly poison to him, and he'd most likely die. Just then, the 2 girls that Geto was talking to would interrupt their conversation. They would ask Geto why they're taking in a kid like him, with Yuji getting mad, staring at them, saying that they were kids too. Geto would then tell everybody to play nice, and introduce Yuji to the 2. He would tell Yuji that their names are Nanako and Mimiko. Yuji would barely pay them any mind, and simply ask Geto if they can get to training already. Geto would tell Yuji that he had somewhere to be. However, when he got back, they could train all he wanted. In the meantime, he would tell Yuji to play nice with the 2, seeing as they were going to be living together from now on. As the years would go by, Yuji would train with Geto, getting to know everyone else as well, with him becoming almost like a brother to Hanako and Mimiko. During these passing years, Yuji would have been going on missions with Geto, so he could capture more cursed spirits and train Yuji while he's at it. By the time Yuji reached the age of 14, he was already considered a grade 1 sorcerer. Yuji would have begun to enjoy his time here with Geto and all of his family members, but soon it would all come to an end. Yuji would be laying in his bed, waiting for Geto to get back so that they can begin training again. Even though Yuji was happy with his life now, things were starting to get boring again for him. Geto would seemingly always be busy and not have any time to train Yuji. When Geto would get back, Yuji would ask him if they could train together. However, Geto would tell Yuji that he's simply too busy right now. Yuji would then begin to ask why, telling him that he's been very busy a lot as of late. Geto would tell Yuji that something interesting will happen very soon, and if he's patient, he would bring him along so that he could see. He would tell Yuji that all he needs is a week, and then after that, things would change indefinitely. Yuji would be patient, waiting the entire week. Just then, Geto would come back and tell everyone that they have some place to be. As they would all gather inside of a large bird, Yuji would ask Geto where they're going, and Geto would tell him that they were headed towards the Tokyo Jujutsu High School to meet someone new and pay an old friend a visit. As they would get to the school grounds, this is when Geto would then confront Yuta. This is when Principal Yaga, Gojo, and all the other sorcerers would come. As all of them would get there, Geto would get all of their attention and announce that on December 24th, the night parade of 100 demons would commence. In both Shinjuku and Kyoto, 1,000 cursed spirits will be unleashed in each city in order to murder all non-sorcerers. Before Geto would leave, he would demand that both sides curse each other to their heart's content. As they would be flying back to their hideout, Yuji would ask Geto what that was all about. He would tell Yuji that on the 24th, he would send him to Shinjuku and allow him to do absolutely whatever he wanted. If he wanted to kill, he could. Yuji would then be grinning ear to ear. He had only been fighting cursed spirits his whole life. He was finally going to be able to use his skills on a human. Yuji couldn't be any happier. Although he would train with Geto from time to time, it wasn't the same. With Geto, they were not fighting to the death, but to all the other people that would be participating in the night parade were free game to Yuji. He couldn't contain his excitement. As time would pass, December 24th would finally come about. Geto would tell Yuji that he would be sent into Shinjuku to do as he pleases, with a couple of other people going in with him, and he would send the rest of them to Kyoto. Yuji would ask him where would he end up going. Geto would reply to Yuji that he would be going straight to Jujutsu High because they wouldn't expect him to be there. He has something he wants to take, and when he gets back, they would all celebrate. Yuji would ask Geto if he could just take him along with him. Geto would tell Yuji that he wasn't strong enough, and that he didn't want Yuji to get in his way. It was no shade to Yuji at all. He just genuinely didn't want Yuji to get hurt. Yuji would then ask Geto if he got stronger next time, would he take him with him? With Geto replying, of course he would. Yuji would smile, and the night parade of 100 demons would commence. Yuji would be sent to Shinjuku, just as Geto had told him. Yuji knew that he had only one objective, and that was to cause as much chaos as possible. Geto would spill out thousands of his cursed spirits over both Shinjuku and Kyoto. He would tell them all good luck, and make his way towards the Jujutsu Tokyo High School. As Geto would leave, the Jujutsu sorcerers would come in droves. As Yuji would see a couple of Jujutsu sorcerers bundled up taking out some cursed spirits, he would make his way over there. Catching the first sorcerer off guard, he would crack the sorcerer on the side of the face, hitting him with a quick combo, making the sorcerer fall to the ground, then kicking his head into the pavement. The other sorcerers around would simply be shocked. There was a kid that just annihilated one of their sorcerers. They would all get on guard, but Yuji would simply smile. This had been the first time he was able to fight humans with the intent to kill. It had felt absolutely euphoric to Yuji. As the sorcerers would surround him, they would try to use their advantage in numbers against Yuji. Yuji would tell the sorcerers that they may have had an advantage with numbers. However, while he's cornered and put under pressure, he was at his peak. Yuji would menacingly smile, asking all of the sorcerers if they loved when their life was put on the line for the thrill of battle, all of them being taken off guard. Yuji would take advantage of this, sprinting at one of the sorcerers. He'd send a jumping knee towards the sorcerer's face, landing the knee bashing their skull in. As the sorcerer would be falling over, he would use the sorcerer like a spring, bouncing off of him, landing over by another one. He would hit a 5-piece combo, stunning the sorcerer, as another sorcerer from behind would try to punch Yuji. He would duck under the attack, grabbing their arm, and slamming them into the other sorcerer. He would send a punch down, as they would go straight through both of them. Turning around, Yuji would see 3 other people. 2 of them would be too afraid to do anything, while the other one was shaking, but still had a fighting stance. Yuji would begin to menacingly laugh and walk towards the other sorcerers. Just then, a man would begin to talk. This is why I've always hated Jujutsu sorcery. People die in unorthodox ways. He would tell the other Jujutsu sorcerers around him that he would take care of it. Yuji would stare, analyzing his opponent. He knew that this guy was strong. He could tell. The guy had goggles and blonde hair with a wrapped blade. This being Nanami. He would tell Yuji that he was only just a kid and he shouldn't be acting like this. Yuji would tell him to shut up and rush in. They would begin in hand-to-hand combat, where Nanami would notice that this kid was on his level, if not even a little bit higher. It made sense to how he was taking care of these Jujutsu sorcerers so easily. Nanami deciding that he needs to get serious, telling himself in his head, kid or not, this is a cursed user who's killed. As they would continue fighting hand in hand, Nanami would begin to explain his technique to Yuji. When he was done with his explanation, he would draw his blade and back up. Then he would sprint back at Yuji. Yuji would be caught off guard by the sudden burst of speed, getting attacked by Nanami's ratio technique. Yuji would block the attack. However, it would still leave a large gash on his arm. Yuji would smile, saying that this was going to be fun. Nanami telling him if this is what he finds fun, he needs to be put down immediately. Nanami would rush back in, trying to use his technique. He would go for the swing, but Yuji would duck out of the way. Countering with an attack of his own, he would send a kick right at Nanami's torso. The attack would land on Nanami, with him being surprised by how strong this kid was. Yuji would then begin to pick up the pace, asking Nanami if he could keep up. This is when Yuji would suddenly switch his fighting style. He normally relied on kicks in most of his battles. With the sudden switch, he would catch Nanami off guard, hitting him with a quick combo. As Yuji would send another punch towards Nanami, he would block it, trying to counterattack, but Yuji would have already read this, ducking under the attack and hitting Nanami with a manji kick. The attack would daze Nanami, and Yuji would capitalize off this, rushing back in, hitting Nanami with yet another combo. Yuji loved fighting like this. He just couldn't hold back his excitement. His concentration was at an all-time high, since he was fighting someone stronger. Yuji's combo wouldn't stop. Anytime Nanami would try to regain his footing, Yuji would already be 2 steps ahead of him. He would send quick jabs. Nanami would try to counter. He would weave out of the way of those, sending more attacks of his own. He would grab Nanami by the face and throw him into a wall. Rushing back in, charging up for a strike, Yuji would say, "This was absolutely the best." As he would go in for the strike with Nanami, the world around him would distort, cracking Nanami in the chest, with his fist going straight through it, as black sparks would fly off of the punch. Yuji didn't know what happened, but after he landed that attack, his body had reached a new peak. Yuji would only smile and turn around, looking at the other sorcerers who were horrified. He would ask, "Who wants next?" As Yuji would continue to go around, killing Jujutsu sorcerers. Ichichi would have notified Gojo that there was a cursed user going around killing all of their sorcerers. Gojo would tell Ichichi that he would handle it. As Yuji would continue hunting down as many sorcerers as he could, a man would then appear before him. He had white hair and a blindfold on. Yuji knew who this was, since Geto would talk about him all the time. He would remember Geto telling him about how strong he was. Yuji would smile, immediately rushing in. He would throw a punch. However, it would get blocked by Gojo's infinity. Gojo would simply stare at Yuji and say, "You're only a kid. What have you done, Suguru?" Yuji would say that he was weird, and he was a coward. He has some stupid barrier around him that would allow no one to attack him. Gojo would sigh, staring at Yuji again. He would then say, "I'll finish this quickly." He would rush in on Yuji, throwing an attack, but to Gojo's surprise, Yuji would dodge it. Yuji would attempt to counter the attack. However, his leg would be caught by infinity. Gojo would then grab onto Yuji, hitting Yuji in the face 3 times quickly. Yuji would smile, noting in his head that if Gojo tries to make physical contact with him, he can try to capitalize off the fact that his infinity may be off with what he's going to attack with. Since he doesn't have an actual way around the barrier, he would try to capitalize off those moments. Gojo would go in for another attack. Yuji would attempt to grab his arm, but realized that the infinity barrier was still there. He didn't know that whatever Gojo deems an attack towards him would automatically be blocked by infinity. So Yuji would simply have to play defensively until he could figure out something. Gojo would then use blue on Yuji, forcing his body to move towards him. As Yuji would be in front of Gojo, he would proceed to combo Yuji, with every attack empowered by blue, even though Gojo looked as if he had no muscle on his body. His punches had weighed a ton to Yuji. He would now understand why Geto was praising this man so much. He would continue to combo Yuji, beating Yuji until he could barely stand. As Yuji would get back up once more, Gojo would then hit him with a red, knocking him out. He wasn't going to kill Yuji. However, he needed to stop his rampage. With Yuji being knocked out, the night parade of 100 demons would go on as regular. Yuta would end up defeating Geto, with Gojo going over to seemingly finish him off. As Yuji would wake up, he would find himself back in his room. He would be wrapped in bandages, with this being seemingly nostalgic to him. He would laugh, and then begin to praise Gojo. Geto was right about him. He was as strong as they come, and one day, he'll become even stronger and crush him. Just then, Mimiko and Hanako would come into the room. They'd be thankful that Yuji was alive, saying that he was beaten really badly. Yuji would grin and tell them that he won't go down that easily. He would then ask Mimiko and Hanako where Geto was. This is when the mood of the room would change. Mimiko and Hanako would tell Yuji that they had some news to tell him, and that he might want to be prepared. They would begin to explain to Yuji about how Geto died trying to fight one of the Jujutsu sorcerers, with Gojo seemingly ending his life. Yuji would be shocked at first, and think they were joking. There's no way that Geto would go out like that. Geto was too strong, stronger than any of them. He would look at both Mimiko and Hanako, asking them if they were joking, that they had to be joking. They would both simply look down at the ground. As Yuji was sitting there, his emotions would begin to boil. Geto was like an older brother figure to him. Geto was the person that had made his life come together, and he was killed, murdered by those Jujutsu sorcerers. Mimiko and Hanako could feel the immense amount of malice coming off of Yuji. As he was like a brother to them, they would try to calm him down. with him simply asking if he could get some alone time. With Yuji being alone, he would begin to curse himself, saying that if he was stronger, Geto could have taken him along with him, and he wouldn't have died. If only he was stronger. He needs to get stronger. Strong enough to where he could kill all those Jujutsu sorcerers for killing Geto. Strong enough so that he'll never lose again. And he'd do anything to do it. Just then, Yuji would remember that weird finger that they picked up all that long ago. Cursed spirits eat that to gain strength. He wondered what would happen if he ever ate it. He knows Geto told him that it would be like a poison to him, but he didn't care. He wanted strength and he needed it now. He would do whatever it took to get as strong as he could, even if it meant risking his own life. Yuji would sprint out of the doors, running towards their storage room, with Mimiko and Anako asking him what he's doing. Yuji would simply reply that he's getting stronger. He'd open the storage room, rummaging around a bit in there, until he found a box. Inside of a box was a finger wrapped in talisman. Mimiko and Hanako would tell him not to do it, that the finger is poisonous and that he'll die if he eats it. Yuji would tell them not to worry about him. He can take it, and he'll get strong. He'll take revenge on those stupid Jujutsu sorcerers. Just then, Yuji would take the finger and begin eating it. The second he would eat it, Mimiko and Hanako would ask him if anything was wrong. He would say that he doesn't feel anything. And just then, a surge of energy would go throughout Yuji's body. Marks would begin to form on his arms and face. In over 1,000 years, Ryomen Sukuna had finally reawoken. He would look over and see Mimiko and Hanako. He was excited because after 1,000 years, he would finally be able to satiate his bloodlust again. Just as he would be about to rush towards them, he would stop in place, where Yuji would say, "Give me my body back." Sukuna would be confused. How was this brat able to take control over his body? As Yuji would take back control, a mouth on the side of Yuji's face would form, asking Yuji who the hell he was and how the hell was he able to take control back over, with Yuji stating that it was his own body and he could do whatever he wanted. Sukuna would ask Yuji if he knew who he was. Yuji would tell Sukuna that he doesn't care who he is. He would tell Sukuna that he was told that these fingers would give him immense power. That's the only reason he ate it. He didn't want some old man speaking in his ear. Sukuna would simply be shocked by Yuji's brazenness, actually enjoying the fact that this brat wasn't afraid of him. He knew who he was. However, he didn't care. He went out of his way to do something reckless, simply in the pursuit of power. Instead of Sukuna immediately disliking Yuji, even though he didn't like being in a cage, he took a fondness for Yuji's greed of power. Yuji would then ask Sukuna if he was to eat more of his fingers, would he be able to gain even more strength than he has now? Sukuna would begin to laugh, laughing harder than he had ever laughed before. This kid was reckless, and he didn't care what happened to him as long as he gained strength. He would tell Yuji that it was possible he could gain more strength by eating his fingers, but in doing so, it was also more dangerous for him, telling Yuji that the second Sukuna was to gain control over this body, Yuji would be the one in the prison, not him. Yuji would let off a menacing smile, telling Sukuna that he's willing to do anything, even risk his own body for the pursuit of power. Sukuna would then say, "Very good," as his mouth would disappear off of Yuji. A couple weeks would pass. Every now and then, he would have a conversation with Sukuna, asking him about his fingers and how he was going to be able to find them. Sukuna would tell Yuji that he has 20 fingers in total. Yuji would ask, how would he be able to find all 20 fingers? Sukuna would tell him that if he was near a finger, he would let him know, but that's all. Yuji would have asked Sukuna if he could train him. However, Sukuna would simply say no, saying that he doesn't want to do such trivial things. The pursuit to power should be by his own hard work. If he wanted to get strong, then he would do it. There are no excuses. Just then, Mimiko and Hanako would burst into Yuji's room. They would tell him that someone that looked like Geto had come. Yuji would rush outside, attempting to see what they were talking about. Just then, Yuji would see the man. He looked exactly like Geto. However, he had stitches on his forehead. Yuji would scan the man, looking him up and down. He would then say, "You're not Geto. Who the hell are you?" Kinjaku would smile, saying that he's someone who wants to help Yuji, but Yuji would have to help him as well. Kinjaku would then begin to explain to Yuji about what he plans to do, also telling Yuji that he could lead him to other fingers. But in order for Yuji to get the fingers, he would have to do things for Kinjaku. Yuji would sit there for a moment. The Jujutsu sorcerers had torn apart his life. He finally had the perfect life, living in a way he was comfortable with. He didn't care what he needed to do. He didn't care how it needed to get done. He would do whatever to kill every last one of those Jujutsu sorcerers. And he would do anything to get as strong as he could. Kenjaku would smile. His entire plan would finally be able to move in motion. Since he had the vessel of Sukuna, a lot more things would go in his favor. But in order for Yuji to grow, so Sukuna's vessel could be as strong as he could, Kenjaku would think to himself, he might need to plant fingers so other curses could absorb the fingers, and he would send Yuji to go after them so he could get even stronger in the process. Just then, he would tell Sukuna that he also knows he's there, explaining more about his plan in depth. Time would then begin to pass. Kenjaku would be gathering special grade curse spirits while sending Yuji on missions to get stronger. As long as the vessel of Sukuna was on their side, everything would go as planned. As one day, Yuji would be getting back from one of his missions that Kenjaku had sent him on, dragging a beaten body of a cursed spirit into the room. Kenjaku would tell Yuji that he did a good job, as he would use his cursed spirit manipulation and absorb the curse. He would then tell Yuji that he's found one of Sukuna's fingers. He would tell him that it's at an old juvenile detention center, telling Yuji that he wants him to go find the finger, and when he finds it, he wants him to immediately consume it. Also telling Yuji that there may be other jujutsu sorcerers there, and to kill them if necessary. Yuji would agree, heading towards the detention center. Just as he would get there, he would notice a curtain falling over the detention center. Trying to rush in before it would completely close, he'd make it inside the barrier, going through the back side of the detention center. The second he would enter the detention center, he would notice that the area around him had been warped, and the place that he had entered from was nowhere to be found. As he would walk through corridor after corridor, he would finally find himself in an open room where he'd see two other people, this being Megumi and Nobara. Megumi would get on guard, asking Yuji who the hell he was and how did he get in here. With Nobara readying her hammer, Yuji, without answering Megumi, would ask him if they were jujutsu sorcerers, with Megumi saying, so what if they were? Just then, Yuji's cursed energy would begin to spill off his body, with both Megumi and Nobara feeling the malice coming off of Yuji's cursed energy. Megumi would whisper to Nobara that this guy was at least grade 1, and that there was still a cursed spirit somewhere around here. They may have been way in over their heads. Megumi would tell Nobara that she needs to follow his demon dog back to the entrance and report this to Ijichi. There was a cursed user here, and Megumi didn't think that Yuji would let them go, so he would hold off Yuji while Nobara went and told Ijichi to get back up. Yuji would then smile. He would ask Megumi if he was ready to battle to the death. Megumi would yell at Nobara, telling her to run, sending one of his demon dogs with her. Yuji would then rush in on Megumi. They would begin their fight. Megumi would immediately summon Nue and his other demon dog for support against Yuji. As he would finish summoning the Shikigami, Yuji would already be in front of him, with Megumi realizing that this guy was extremely fast. Yuji would throw a left punch, with Megumi just barely getting out of the way, but the force of the attack would have grazed Megumi, making a small cut in his cheek. Megumi would be shocked. The attack didn't even touch him, but it still did damage. This guy was dangerous. He would send Nue after Yuji. Yuji would attempt to grab the bird and slam him down, but the second he would touch Nue, he would be shocked and stunned in place. Megumi would then rush in with his demon dog. He would begin to combo Yuji, landing some attacks while allowing his demon dog to also attack. But just then, Yuji would finally regain his footing. Megumi would then throw a punch towards Yuji, with Yuji smiling, bashing his head into Megumi's fist, catching Megumi off guard, sending a kick towards his stomach. As the kick would land on Megumi's gut, he would begin to cough up spit. That attack had winded him. Yuji would follow up immediately. Comboing Megumi, he wouldn't give Megumi any type of breathing room at all. Megumi would be thinking to himself that he needs to get some space from this guy. He could not beat him in hand-to-hand combat, saying that he was simply too skilled. As Yuji would push Megumi back into a wall, he would throw another punch. But this time, Megumi would duck underneath it. Yuji would attempt to throw in another attack. However, Megumi would have summoned one of his toads, with the toad grabbing him and moving him out the way. Just then, Megumi would then summon Great Serpent. He would then use an extension technique, combining both Toad and Nue together. Megumi would need to use tactics during this fight, seeing that Yuji was simply brawn and he couldn't outpace him. He would use tactics to try to dip and dodge around Yuji, to attack him as he could. Yuji would have been hit by Great Serpent, making him crash backwards into a wall. Megumi would then call back Great Serpent. Yuji would get out of the rubble of the wall, with his head bleeding. He would laugh and tell Megumi that he had a weird technique, but all of this would amount to nothing, because he'll be dying here. Megumi would tell Yuji that he has a lot more to live for, so he'll be the one dying. They would go back in for round 2. Yuji would rush in, trying to outspeed Megumi, but Megumi would use his toads to swing around for mobility, trying to capitalize off every opening that he could get. He would send Great Snake towards Yuji again, But Yuji was prepared this time. He would cock back his fist. The second Great Serpent would get in front of him. He would throw the punch, smashing it into the Shikigami's head, killing it right then and there. Megami would then try to go in. He thought that he had gained an opening since Yuji had finished off his Great Serpent. He would attempt to strike Yuji in the back, but Yuji was expecting this. He would turn around, throwing a punch. It would catch Megami off guard, as Yuji would smash his fist into Megami's face. With most of his summons becoming undone, Yuji wouldn't waste any time again. Yuji would step forward again, rocketing a right from his hip. It would crash into Megami's jaw, leaving him dazed. The attack would launch Megami back a little, but Yuji would grab his arm, pulling him back in. He would send 3 quick jabs with his left. Megami would try to swing an attack of his own, but Yuji would duck underneath it, sending a leg sweep towards Megami, making him drop to the ground. As Megami was on the ground, Yuji would send a kick straight towards Megami's stomach. It would make contact with Megami, caving his stomach in. Getting hit by this attack would send him flying into a wall. Yuji would laugh, calling Megami weak, asking him if this was really all he had. Megami would call Yuji a freak, telling him that if Megami was going to die here, he would be taking Yuji with him. Megami would then form hand signs, as his cursed energy would spike. But just before either of them can do anything, a special great cursed spirit would jump in between both of them. It would strike Megami in the face, sending him back into the wall, knocking him out. The cursed spirit would begin to cackle, and Yuji would stare at it, getting pissed off because it interrupted their fight. He could tell, at the end there, Megami was about to do something crazy, and the cursed spirit interrupted. Sukuna would take a liking to Megami, saying to himself that if they ever were to interact in the future, he would capitalize off the moment. He would then tell Yuji that he believes that this cursed spirit has one of his fingers. Yuji would stare at the cursed spirit and smile. Just then, Yuji would enter a fighting stance and tell the curse to come on and bring it. But I think that's where I'm going to end off part 1. I hope you guys enjoyed. While this is being posted, I'll probably be working on the part 6 of What If Yuji Was Like Yoriichi. And again, when I finish the What If Yuji Was Like Yoriichi, I will be working on What If Yuji Had All For One. And again, thank you all for the support. Right now, we're currently at 750 subscribers, and I couldn't imagine getting this far this early on. So again, thank you all. Thank you so much. This has been my dream for a minute, and I'm happy that all of you actually enjoy it. When I reach 1K, I probably will make a Discord, and in there, I could communicate with you guys more efficiently. So before I reach 1K, I'll probably get it all set up, and then when I reach 1K, I'll officially launch it. But yes, thank you again for all the support, and thank you for listening. And yeah, peace.